time, I'm going to get started with our introductions, and then we'll have Doris join us for the first portion of this event. And I think she's just jumping in right now as I speak. So just a reminder before we get going, this session will be recorded and posted to our chapter pages. So not everyone's camera will show, but just be mindful if you don't wish to be shown in this session that you do turn off your camera at this time. And I'm just going to start our recording.
Oh, I already started though. Don't worry.
Thank you. Awesome. Alrighty, so as I mentioned, welcome to everyone, and a special welcome goes out to Dr. Doris Greenspun, RNAO CEO, who's joining us virtually as part of our fall tour, as well as our two guest speakers, Daniel Oberwall from the Center of Extended Learning at University of Waterloo, and Beth Blackett, who's joining from Student Wellness Services from Queen's University. So we're very happy to have all of you here with us and joining us this afternoon. So my name is Lil Bresson. I'm the Region 11 rep for RNAO's Board of Directors, and I'll be hosting our event virtually this afternoon. It's an honor to have all of you join us for Region 11's fall tour and our Student Success Series to learn about speaking out, strategies for success online, and self-care. And we know this year has been so challenging and brought upon a lot of learning and reflection for many of us, especially our frontline and support staff preventing and managing COVID in all of our communities across Northern Ontario. And then faculty and students who are also navigating this new territory of online learning and virtual placements. And we know it hasn't been easy for everyone. So that's why we wanted to take this opportunity to bring everyone together and really focus on what RNAO is doing during COVID and amidst this crazy year that it's been, and also what we're doing for students across Region 11. So that's why students have kind of been prioritized for this event. So as I noticed on the first slide, please feel free to send any questions throughout the event in the chat box below. And yes, happy Nurse Practitioners Week to all of our NPs that are out there. Thank you, Lisa. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer those as best we can as we move along today. So for those who may be new to RNAO, welcome, and we're glad you've joined us. So RNAO is the professional association that represents registered nurses, nurse practitioners, and nursing students across Ontario. And since 1925, RNAO has advocated for healthy public policy, promoted excellence in nursing practice, increased nurses' contribution to shaping the healthcare system, and influenced decisions that affect nursing and health in the public they serve. So through many efforts, RNAO influences, informs, advocates, connects, protects, and inspires. And you'll hear that a lot through our session today. So just a background, again, welcome to our 6th annual fall tour. We're happy that Doris, RNAO CEO, is here to speak with us about the successes and achievements that we should be proud of as nursing and as a nursing community, including the release of ECHO 3.0 and our relentless advocacy to ensure nurses have what they need to fight COVID-19 in our communities, especially across the north. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge who is Region 11, for those of you that don't know. So Region 11 includes Algoma, Nipissing, Kirkland Lake, Temiskaming, Porcupine, and Sudbury and district chapters. And collectively, Region 11 is home to 1,840 members and counting and growing every day. And we can't thank you enough for your continued support for RNAO. So for the past year, Region 11 has really worked together to bring you 2 virtual sessions to all our members across the region, and we're continuously seeking opportunities to resource share, to collaborate, and to support our nursing community and the public across the north. So moving forward over the next several months and into next year, our collective focus is really on supporting and involving our nursing students, as well as bringing to light some of the inequities that have really been reinforced by the pandemic, and working on solutions and informing public policy. So we value the input and all your commitment, especially students, to standing up and speaking out for nursing and health, and encourage everyone to get involved in RNAO, especially early in your career. So for the students that are on the line today, being involved in RNAO, and I can attest to this, you really are powered to be a leader in nursing and in healthcare, and you have access to resources that will help advance your career, but also help advance nursing and health in Ontario as a whole. So it's a great opportunity. I'm really happy that you're joining us today. So for this specific event, our goals are going to be to connect you with RNAO, the resources that are available to you and each other, to inform you about what RNAO is doing and what's happening, strategies for online learning and your success, as well as self-care, and to inspire you to take action and be leaders in nursing, whether you're a student, a nurse, or a nurse practitioner, or even a community member. So as we go along, I just want to bring up our agenda just to help keep us on track this afternoon. So in part 1, we'll hear from Doris before taking a brief break and moving into part 2, which are student success series. And there will be an opportunity for some questions and discussion before closing remarks later this afternoon. So we hope you'll stay engaged in the whole session. But as I did mention, this is recorded and will be posted to all of our chapter pages, hopefully today or into late, early next week. And I'll be sure to forward an email to all of you so that you're aware that it is up and ready for everyone to view. So without further ado, because I know people have places to be, I'd like to welcome Dr. Doris Greenspun. Doris is the CEO of RNAO, and since April of 1996, she's been our CEO and is the founder of RNAO's internationally renowned Best Practice Guidelines, or BPGs, and Best Practice Spotlight Organization program. Before beginning with RNAO, she served as the Director of Nursing at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, and she holds a Master's of Nursing from the University of Michigan and a PhD in Sociology from York University. In working with Doris, she truly is a remarkable leader, visionary, mentor, and true embodiment of everything nursing. She leads with courage and ensures the needs of our nurses and our communities, especially those most vulnerable and at risk, are really at the core of all decision making and public policy. So I'm so grateful Doris was able to join us today. And Doris, the floor, or the virtual floor, is yours.
Thank you. And I do not know if we will get through the entire presentation because the minister is calling me at 1:45. That's all to say, and I said to a debriefing session, we had a press conference today, and Lil was there in relationship to the situation in the province, as well as in long-term care in particular. I met with the Premier on Monday face-to-face. I have spoken with them numerous times on behalf of all of us, and she's calling me at 1:45, and they have a press conference at 2. But I said in the debriefing, Lil, that I stopped getting my hopes up. And that takes a lot from a person that is always positive, because it's like a roller coaster. You get your hopes up that they're listening and making the changes that are needed, and then it's a big drop. It's like those super tall roller coasters that you go to the top with your hopes and then boom to the bottom. So I stop. I now absolutely shut down the feelings of getting hopeful on this until I will hear that actually they're doing something serious. And so you will hear at 2, whatever the announcement it is, likely about changing the framework in the province. We asked for more than that this morning. I would advise you that you go to the COVID portal of RNAO and you will be able to see the slides that we shared this morning. And also, I hope you all get my blog, and you will see in the blog the link to the actual press conference, which was quite formidable. The first time, I think, in my life, for all these years, that we need to say at the end to the 100 people and the endless number of media, sorry, we got to go after an hour and a half. It was scheduled for an hour, and after an hour and a half, we said we got to go. Everybody needed to go to other places, but they seem wanting to hear more. A lot of the media have tweeted already on what we are asking. So let's keep our fingers crossed, but let's not get our hopes to the moon, because we may have a big drop again. Very quickly to share some of the initiatives that we have been doing and where we have been involved this year. And I say to people that COVID in many ways gave us things in a silver plate. As difficult as it is, it has shown the visibility on nursing in a way that nothing before did. The question is, what did we do as a collective and as individuals in using that visibility to really forward the collective good of the health of our populations, right? That's really what matters here. And I shared yesterday in another one of the fall tours that my answer to that is in an article that I will send to you that is called Conversations with Florence, because I was asked to write about this issue of COVID and nursing for a journal, and I wrote about my conversations with Florence, of what would Florence be saying if she were to be looking, and she rightfully is, down. And I think in relationship to RNAO, she would be pretty pleased, but in relationship to nursing around the world or overall, I doubt it. I think she will be very happy on the clinical work we did, which is outstanding. She will be very happy about the research and administration, but how much nursing overall took advantage of this one in a lifetime opportunity for all of you, regardless of how young you are, to really advance nursing in the policy arena. I think RNAO in many ways is an exception around the world, and hence why around the world they're asking us to write and to speak about that. Which is nothing to feel proud about. You know, one can feel very proud RNAO is doing it, but I wish everybody other organization, because then nursing will be in a different spot. The issues with the challenges with seniors in residence is not only a challenge in Ontario or in Canada, it's a challenge in the US, it's a challenge in some other places, in some of them not to the extent that in Ontario and in Canada, right? The OECD only speaks about 40% on OECD countries. We have the distinction of almost 80%, and we are heading to the same degree now, as I shared this morning in the press conference. We are already at close to 70% of all deaths being in nursing homes again. But it's to say that we could have had an international pressure movement of nursing pursuing the lives of vulnerable people throughout this pandemic. If you look at opioids, similarly. So I say this because you, and especially the ones that came to the fall tour, are the soldiers, the champions at the front, right? So let's take this opportunity as a collective, as small as the collective is, or as big when we are at an assembly, to really send the tentacles everywhere else where you are involved, any other group that you are involved, to remind people of the year of the nurse in the midst of COVID, to remind people that never in the history of our lives, because there will be, hopefully, not another COVID in 5 years, right? That this is a unique opportunity to really not only applaud nurses are heroes, but also have nurses influence healthy public policy in a way that never happened before. So that's critical. You all know who RNAO is. I don't need to tell you, but I do need to remind you that there are two critical pillars for RNAO, two of them. One is the policy area and the programs and policies and work that we do in policy with outstanding reports, with activism, with advocacy. The other is the BPG work, best practice guidelines, where we help people really implement guidelines, implement best practice, and we make it easy for them, not only with the guidelines themselves, but with training about the guidelines. And then, of course, the connection between the two. The perfect example again, opioids, right? So we did a lot of policy work, including to get clinics open, safe injection sites open. We did a BPG, and of course, the two leverage one on another, and we push it forward. In relationship to COVID-19 in particular, it is very important for you to know that we have been involved from day one. Day one, when there was no collaborative table or nothing, we already were at the table, and we were discussing the issues of PPEs, and we were discussing the issues of testing, and we were discussing the issues of staffing in long-term care and overall in the system. The only difference between then and now is that we believed, rightfully or wrongfully, for the first week, I believed that what the goodies I was given were true. I believe that we had enough PPE. I believe that, you know, we will have the staffing that was needed. Pretty soon though, the mask was out, was, you know, taken away, peeled away, to realize that there was not enough PPE, that there was not enough, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that very soon, way before anybody else, RNAO put the call that nursing homes were the first priority. The first priority for testing, the first priority for masks, needless to say about staffing, because if we don't keep the virus out, it can go like wildfire, and it did. Today, we have over 2,000 deaths in this province. Today, in the second wave, we are approaching 70% of all deaths. Yesterday, we surpassed 200 in the second wave in nursing homes. 70% of all deaths are again in nursing homes, and it's only increasing unless things change. So being in the committees, being in the places is all good, but nothing is good until things change. So, you know, all these meetings with the premier or the call from the minister, etc., will only be as good as the deliverables we get. And if we don't get them, we will continue to put pressure. We will build a movement, which we are already. Some of you were at the webinar last Monday. We will continue to do that. And we already discussed as the briefing of the press conference today what next steps will be. And they will be moving forward with an unbearable pressure, both for government to use their tools to really suffocate this virus and be able to get hold of what's going on, and to staff and to protect residents in nursing homes the way we are asking. And we as individuals, and we need to become champions of doing what's the right thing to do. Because also if government does two things and people, individuals don't do it, that will not help either, because people are tired, people are exhausted, people are fed up of the virus. So when the government will put stricter restrictions, not only we need to applaud it, or if it's public health officers in your own jurisdictions, not only we need to applaud it, we also need to ensure that we become champions of others doing what's the right thing to do. The social distance, the not mixing houses, the mask, etc., 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 that by now we know it very well. We put 17 recommendations pretty early during the pandemic in the first wave. Some of them have been achieved, some of them remarkably well have been achieved, and some of them have not. And what's important is that we did have an impact on the following. Universal masking, absolutely yes, not only through our work with others like Jennifer Kwan and others, but also through our own campaign on Maskathon, right? It was extremely successful. Everybody knows it moved even to the US and Europe. And by now, no one needs to talk about masks because that's pretty clear that we need to do that. I would take it a step forward and tell you that with my knowledge of what's happening today in this province, you should wear a mask every time you go out of your home. There is enough knowledge about this virus that even in the streets, if someone sneezes and has the virus and you just happen to pass there, that you need to be more careful than what we have been. So of course you catch it much less than in an enclosed place that is crowded, but my recommendation would be universal masking everywhere, and it doesn't, it's just an inconvenience worth paying the price. Pre-outbreak testing, we were successful to an extent, is moving faster now and more. Robust case and contact tracing, it took forever until we got hold of that, but it's happening now, except that now, because the numbers in places like Toronto, Peel, etc., are out of control, as my public health colleagues will know, it's very difficult to do case and contact tracing. Self-reporting of suspected and confirmed cases. Workers working in one facility. That is happening even in nursing homes, with the exception of agency nurses that continue to work in multiple places. So we are pushing that agency nurses should go to one home and stick with one home so that they don't carry the virus, both from one home to another, but also to their own families, to their own communities. We all know that the people that work in nursing homes, the PSWs in particular, are very vulnerable communities. They live in multi-generational houses. They live usually, because of the low pay, in more crowded spaces than others. And so not only we are endangering one home with another in terms of nursing homes and their residents, we're endangering their families, quite frankly, by not protecting the workers. 174 interviews just by April. just in the first couple of months. We are now surpassed 700 interviews. 700 interviews. You will see some of the breakdown of that, and it's amazing work that we have done with the media and those that attended the press conference today. You saw that the Global Mail, Toronto Star, Global, CP, all of them were there. What RNAO says matters. So you can see that today over 700. What RNAO says, it matters. And that is why we need to be very, very responsible to what we say. I know, for example, that some of you, or a few of you, were concerned that we call for the resignation of Dr. David Williams. Well, one day, someone will do a freedom of information and ask for my emails, because that's all in emails with the premier and the minister. And you all know that yesterday, everybody asked for the resignation, and was a huge editorial in 2 newspapers, major newspapers, saying we need change. Because it doesn't matter if it's the character, it doesn't matter what it is, but if a chief medical officer of health cannot act independently and say what's needed in the province then is in danger. And that is the situation where we are today, where you have the modeling table saying this needs to change, where you have scientists going to the media saying we said A and what happened is B, and where you have a chief medical officer of health that to this day is defending government when that position, when we created that position, and I was involved in that, with Sheila Basrur, it was created to be independent from government so that the person could speak freely. That's not what we are seeing today. So here is one of the pieces that was very, very good that we did very early on during the pandemic, and is we created the COVID-19 portal. And that portal has all the information you need, from positions that we have taken, to the media that we have done, to the blogs, to the support groups that we have for families, support groups for staff, the webinars, etc., etc., etc. A very powerful portal that I will not take your time, but you can go there and explore it yourself and use it also in a way that can advance your work and your advocacy. The Be a Nurse program, around 9,000 nurses. So if you hear anywhere, do we have nurses to move to the 4 hours of care? Yes, we do. We may not have it for the full 4 worked hours, but we have for 3.5. So let's move from 2.7 that we are now funding to 3.5 paid worked hours, and we have the nurses, and we have also the PSWs. Everything that we do at RNAO is guided by the ends that the board has set. And the board has set those ends in conjunction, of course, to keeping the pulse, not only on members, but what's happening overall. And the ends, in essence, give the direction of what are the broad areas where we are engaged. So engaging careers and peace and nursing students to stimulate membership is not just to have more members or more funding, is to have increasingly stronger and stronger and wider and deeper voice, to advance the role of nurses, to speak out on emerging difficult issues. Easy issues, anybody can speak. It's the tough issues that RNAO is well known for advancing. And we absolutely do that with pride and with responsibility and with the facts. And at the end of the day, all of that is done to influence healthy public policy. Extremely, extremely important, especially in the context now of COVID, where vulnerable populations have not always been accounted the way they should. Critically important. On the policy arena, what's critical is not only we work on COVID-related issues, we have the tremendous work of the nurse practitioner interest group, NPIG, with their virtual webinars. So yes, I echo the happy NP week. And we also have the NP symposium that is coming in November with huge attendance already, with a fantastic presentation about the recommendations for the task force, as well as the deputy minister, Helen Angus is coming, Barbara Stilwell, who spoke at our AGM is coming, and many, many other, and of course, a large number of MPs and MP allies that will be at that event. Similarly, the nursing home basic care guarantee, I spoke with you about the press conference today, and I strongly recommend that you join there and listen to the press conference as well as see the slides. I think it will help you deal with issues in your own communities in a much better way. The RNAO Black Nurses Anti-Discrimination Task Force, led by Angela Cooper-Brathwaite, our immediate past president, and by Corsita, is a tremendous task force that is helping us to tackle the issues of discrimination against Black nurses in our own profession, in our institutions, in our, whether it's the union, whether it's the college, whether it's colleges, whether it's universities, whether it's admission to universities, whether it's jobs, etc., etc., etc. That task force will have as a result a report. In addition to the report, a toolkit. And in addition to that, it has a monthly webinars. Next Monday is the one coming that I will encourage all of you to attend, because just based on the pictures I am seeing in this fall tours, Lil, I see most of us are my color. So the next webinar on Monday is about becoming an ally. Hence why it's so important that we all attend and we learn. We learn from our colleagues, Black nurses, on how to become an ally so that we can stand with them, for them, and so they never should struggle again for things that is a, it's a no-brainer for us. You put your application to a job, you put your application to a university or a college, most people get accepted and given the job or enter the university based on grades or based on performance. That is not the case, colleagues, with Black nurses. It is not the case. They go through unnecessary pain to actually be able to prove that they're worth. So it's critically important that we change that. Action alerts are ever more powerful, and it's because we have more members, but because members also are extremely engaged. So we have several action alerts, check for them. And of course, the one on long-term care is critical. We're calling not only for the 4 worked hours for seniors, and that's the hashtag 4, you can write it in the chat, Lil, 4 hours for seniors, and the 4 is with numbers. And we are also going and pushing for national standards on this. So 46,000 members. This is where we are, more or less. Still the phone calls need to be captured there. 46 strong people voluntarily joining for moving issues ahead, for feeling connected like the 22 that are here today, for feeling that we're making a difference, whether it is at the bedside, street side, or home care side, or school side, or university side, or wherever you work, right? Correctional facilities, and 46,000 people making a difference also as a collective to ensure that we pursue healthy public policy, from social determinants to environmental determinants, to issues like opioids, to issues like long-term care, to issues like the role of nurses, to issues of health human resources in nursing, all and more. And that is guided again by what's happening as well as your own resolutions at AGM, which is something coming up, which is critically important that you put some that are local in nature but have provincial implications. The PLP, what is very important for those of you that are working especially clinically, is that many of the programs have dropped COVID-19 coverage and other communicable diseases. So as soon as RNAO became aware of that, we did work with our PLP, and we did augment, and yes, we are paying more, and it's just fine. That's not moving to you. And our PLP, which is an insurance, which covers you for sure. It's not, you know, a maybe. You have a policy behind, and hence the importance of it. And it is covering COVID-19 and communicable diseases as mandatory, by the way, by the College of Nurses, because the college is not going to accept the ones that are not covering COVID-19 and communicable and other communicable diseases. Lab continues to serve people, and let me tell you, during COVID, my gosh, we needed to serve people. Some of them we are still serving, helping them. Cyber liability is there for you. And of course, you do still have the free membership for new grads. Go for it, as well as what you see there on the left, and we will PDF this PowerPoint and give it to you. On the left, you can see if you bring five members, whether those are RNs and NP or new grads, and remember, new grads is for free, so it should be easy. You get your membership for next year for free. Student benefits, many. And I need to give a shout, and I think Lil will do too, to Rodolfo and the NSO. My gosh, these people are taking things in a proactive way. They are in social media. They are doing all kinds of campaigns about using a mask, about becoming a member, about being proactive and active. Always NSO is fantastic, but I think Rodolfo and his executive have taken it to a whole new level. Best practice spotlight organizations. You see that we had a call. We already launched new VPSOs in long-term care. We are going to launch new VPSOs in May and June again in long-term care. We did one during the pandemic, virtual, we did it. And we are also launching VPSOs in OHTs. 3 of them we launched in person pre-pandemic. 1 of them we did virtual. It was a lot of fun. It gives you a lot of tools, the Zoom. It gives you to do exercises in the rooms and to do even drawings collectively. It's very fantastic. There are lots of silver linings. The entire training of Hospital del Trabajador in Chile, I did with PG virtual. And not only was fantastic, but we showed up in the newspaper a couple of days after, and that is the largest newspaper in Chile. So that was quite a fantastic happening. Capacity building. Most of our initiatives are free of charge. The attendance is tremendous. And one of the ones that we had that also coalesced with the release of the report is the nursing and compassionate care in the age of artificial intelligence. Very interesting and important report done in conjunction with AMS, and we had a conference, and it was terrific. And like that, there are many more, and they're all posted on the website. Webinars, a large number of webinars. Do go to the website. Lil can put you the link to it. Do examine those and join. Media coverage, look at this. 2,400 hits compared to 295 in 2019. Well, guys, there is COVID. That's all I can answer for that. And then 1,300 by the executive versus 43. But the overall is such a huge number of presence in the media that is just inspiring. Very, very inspiring. An awesome article profiling our Black anti-discrimination against Black nurses task force in the Toronto Star, a major article profiling Corsita, profiling Angela, profiling RNAO. Just beautiful, the outreach that we are getting. Social media activity, just look on the left upper corner and you will see how intense that is, how much we have increased the social media. If you don't mind, Lil, because I will need to go in a few minutes and then I can be back with the call with the minister. If you can put my Twitter, which is Doris Greenspoon, no dot in between. And also if you can put my WhatsApp, which is +1 647 505 1531, +1 647 505 1531. Any of you that wants to be in the know, in addition to what you already know, in terms of the latest in the news or the latest tweets that we at least recommend to tweet, please send me a WhatsApp and I will make sure that I alert you as I alert others. And on the Twitter, of course, if you don't follow me, and if you do, I will follow you back. Important information that one can get to Twitter, and I'm sure Lil is very active. Follow up Lil also. And Facebook, put your Facebook, Lil, so people really can connect. There is a new field that I have, and it's a field but backed by evidence. A lot of colleagues within the board and within the assembly are becoming social media savvy in an amazing way. And the power that we have through social media, Twitter, every politician follows Twitter, so that's easy. Every media follows Twitter. Facebook for other generations, a Snapshot for other generations, etc. But the power of social media is immense, so please use it because it's to your advantage and the advantage of RNAO as a whole and of healthy public policy. Colleagues, absolutely we can do it together. In fact, we are doing it together. So we just need to push more and more and more. And I would suggest, Lil, that you continue with the meeting. I will connect now with the minister. I can be back and people can then ask questions if they have for like 10, 15 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, definitely. That works out. We'll let
So,
you go.
I will not disconnect. I will put.
Sounds good.
And I will call and I will be back. Thank you.
No problem, Doris. So next in our schedule here, and I'll just reshare my screen. Thanks for your patience, everyone. So I hope that was informative, what Doris had to share, and she will be back, as she mentioned, to answer some of your questions. And just if you haven't looked yet in the chat box, I did share links alongside many of the things she mentioned, alongside our social media handles that you're all welcome to share. Jump online. I will say Doris is extremely active on social media and keeping us all informed. And I would highly encourage you to do so as well, especially with a lot of our pressing issues that are coming up concerning long-term care and a variety of other topics. So definitely stay tuned and join into our social media. So next in our agenda, and we are right on time actually, we'll take about a 5 to 10 minute break. And you're welcome to share messages for healthcare providers in the chat box or open up your screen to join us. We'll take about a 10-minute break and join back here. We'll join back at 1:55. So if everyone can be back at 1:55, and we'll continue into the second half of our session as well as questions with Doris. Okay, everyone, welcome back. And just to keep us on track, we'll keep things rolling here and get into the second half of our session this afternoon. So this year, as I mentioned, has truly been challenging and a learning opportunity for, I would say, almost all of us. However, in Region 11, we especially recognize the impacts that the changing learning environment has had on our BSCN undergraduate students. So not only have you had challenges in placements and juggling courses, but having to move to online courses or completely online semesters, we know was new for many of our nursing students in the region. So in addition to that, we had added family pressures and work demands being in nursing on top of BSCN requirements that left many of you shy of time for really focusing on yourselves and self-care. And so we have listened and we wanted to provide an opportunity to give you some tips and tricks and skills to learn more and really support you on your journey. So thanks to those of you who did complete the survey that went out earlier this fall and helped us select our 2 topics for this first segment in our student series, which included strategies for online learning and self-care. So we're really happy to have 2 guest speakers here to share a bit on both those topics this afternoon. So first off, I'd like to welcome Dr. Daniel Oberwall. So Daniel is an online learning consultant at the CEL, where he coordinates the development of fully online courses from across the university and advises faculty and instructions on key pedagogical and design decisions in the online environment. So Daniel also serves as an adjunct faculty member at Trinity College, University of Toronto, where he teaches his own online courses in the Faculty of Divinity. When he's not designing and teaching online courses and doing all that fun stuff, Daniel enjoys taking his family out on beautiful hike trails in and around Hamilton where he lives. And fortunately, we've had some good weather for that recently down south, which is awesome. And just so you know a little bit about the CL, I did add a couple facts there, and I'm sure Daniel will speak to that, but it truly is a remarkable piece of the University of Waterloo and a leader in online learning. So it seemed only fitting that he come join us today to provide you with, I would say, probably the best strategies that are out there for succeeding in the online environment. So with that, Daniel, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Liliana. Can everyone hear me okay? Am I sounding good? Okay, I had a little trouble with my microphone earlier, so I'm slightly paranoid. Okay, I'm gonna do a screen share here for some slides, and so I'm used to Microsoft Teams actually, and it doesn't, I'll do this. Oh no, my screen share is seizing up, doesn't have permission. Lily, would you be able to jump in and maybe I can just give you a nod for, because I think you have the slides, right?
I do.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem.
We're an MS Teams shop at CEL, so this Zoom thing is, I use it sometimes, but it's not my native, my home space these days. Well, while Liliana's bringing up the slides, I'll just kind of jump in a little bit here. You already heard a good introduction of me. My name is Daniel Oberwall. I'm OLC, Online Learning Consultant at CEL. And just by way of introduction to myself, you heard a little bit about my background and what I do at CEL and my teaching as well. But I thought it's sort of worth sharing that if you are thrust into online learning and online education right now, and you are so far absolutely hating it, I deeply, deeply sympathize. That is precisely where I began. And it's actually my visceral disgust with online learning when I first started having to teach online classes at Trinity at University of Toronto. That actually propelled me to try to learn more and eventually do an intensive program with the University of Wisconsin-Madison in instructional design and online teaching, because I was stuck doing this thing that I hated and I thought didn't work. And I figured I might as well learn as much as I could about it and make the best of it. And that was radically life-changing. And I'm now a huge online learning enthusiast, and I've now devoted my career to it, really. So, but that is, and you are not going to come away most likely from this 25-minute presentation, that gung-ho about online learning, unless you already are, which is fine. But it is to say, I do absolutely empathize and sympathize very much if you're finding this frustrating, especially for so many of us who are thrust into online learning, not so much by choice right now, but by necessity. So I wanted to share kind of 5 overarching strategies for you, and we can go to the next slide to take a look at what those are. that I hope will help you at least get as much out of this semester and next term, if it's online as well, as you possibly can. Again, you're not going to become probably a convert. A lot of you are going to be eager to get back in the classroom, although a few of you might really like online. But I think if you focus on these 5 areas broadly, you're going to make the most of the situation and make it go as well as it possibly can. Now, I want to focus kind of a little more on theory here, actually. I will talk about some sort of pragmatic tips, but everybody's situation is a little bit different. Everybody's classes are different. Life situation is different. And so I think it's often very helpful to actually step back and look at the sort of at more theoretical level, the kinds of things to keep your eye on as an online learner so that you can then build out some strategies of your own and what works really well for you specifically and personally in your own situation. So the 5 overarching things that I want to look at here are access to information and I've got to move because I read my own slides. Access to information and learning materials, which sort of goes without saying in a way, but I think is worth unpacking as well for a moment. The next thing is time to invest in the learning process. Again, kind of goes without saying, but a little bit worth unpacking. And then these next 3 items that may not be quite as obvious if you're not accustomed to online learning, which is your metacognitive skills, so knowing how to learn, thinking about your own learning, and then motivation, healthy affect, mental health. And in the next presentation, I'll get into some of that a little more broadly, but I'll talk a bit about it in the context of online learning specifically. And then the last topic, community, how to experience a sense of connection or seek that out in your online learning. So why don't we jump in and go to my first overarching message here that's going to pull right through all 5 of those topics. When you're an online learner, be your own biggest asset. Maybe the biggest difference of all when you make this transition into the online space is that you have to be more responsible for what's going on with your own learning process, whether we like it or not, because we have a kind of distance between us when we're connecting via computer that is simply part of the equation. It can't just be canceled away. So hopefully your instructors, your professors, your TAs, or whoever is working with you is very cognizant of trying to make the connection with you, is looking out, trying to check in with you, and cares a lot about your success and your learning. Hopefully that's true for every one of your courses, but even the most motivated and even the most experienced online instructor has a much harder time in front of a computer screen, really knowing what's happening over on your end, really knowing what's connecting, what's working, and what isn't. So you have to be keeping an eye on yourself and your own learning and becoming your own biggest asset, your own advocate as the process goes forward. So keep that strongly in mind in each of these 5 categories as we go. So we can move to the next. Yeah. So the first one here, as I said, in a lot of ways seems really obvious, and it is obvious. And if you want to call up the actual content there, Lillian, with the next click, yeah, it kind of seems obvious, and it sort of is obvious that you need access to information and learning materials to succeed online. But as I said before, I think it's worth unpacking just a little bit what that can really mean. If you're starting a new online course, or even if you're midstream with one right now, make sure that before anything else happens, as you get going, to look through the course and identify very specifically in as much detail as you possibly can, exactly what you will need in terms of required technology, how to get help with the technology if you need it, establish internet access for yourself, make sure you can get to the learning materials, and make sure that they're accessible. So when it comes to required technology, this can vary a lot, a lot more than we often might assume. Most classes, you probably need a computer. Some things you could maybe do on a phone, though, or a tablet or something like that. Make sure you have the right kind of machine. And make sure very much that you know who to get in touch with if you have technological problems, because it obviously happens a lot. The prof or the instructor might be your first line of contact, but very often if you're having more technical issues with a system or with the computer, they may not know. I mean, they're not necessarily tech wizards themselves, especially these days when everyone's been thrown into the online environment, like it or not. So know who else to go to, know who tech support is at your institution. Make sure you have them, kind of on speed dial, because you will it's very likely that you'll run into something that you might need some help with. Internet access is a big piece here and much, much bigger than people realize. We have people all across even the province of Ontario, and then certainly worldwide learners who may or may not have access to constant high-speed internet right in their own house. If you're in a rural area, or for whatever other reason you don't have that kind of internet access, that's a lot of learners if you look at the research and the numbers, and you may well be one of those learners. So this is a key thing. If you're in that situation where you don't just have the big high-speed pipeline straight to your bedroom, make sure you know how you're going to get online and when. To develop a strategy for how you'll gain that internet access, whether it's working at the library or whether you need to take your phone to some corner of town where you get just enough signal. It can be really frustrating and really difficult, but if you have a plan, of course, those frustrations are going to be as minimal as they can be. And finally, make sure you can get a hold of all the learning materials. This is connected to the above as well. With internet access and all that kind of thing, but it also is connected to this next point, which is about accessible formats if you need them. And accessibility can be whether there's a vision impairment or a hearing impairment or some kind of learning disability or any other accessibility issue. Make sure that you've identified as much as you possibly can the learning materials you're expected to use. And if you have an accessibility issue like that, be sure you're reaching out right away, getting in touch with the instructor, making sure you're coordinating to get you the materials you need in the format that you need them. Not every instructor is necessarily going to come in right now with universal design for everything. It's the kind of thing we aim for at CEL when we have a whole year to build a course. We have tons of time, but right now people are just thrust into this and they're just doing the best that they can. So if you need that accessible format of some kind, make sure you reach out and ask for it. So information and learning materials is that. So we can move to the next piece. So time for the learning process. Again, this one kind of goes without saying, but is maybe the #1 thing in a lot of ways that you can do to succeed in online learning. Once again, as I said, being your own biggest asset. In the world of online learning, you don't have necessarily the same kind of rhythm that you might be used to in your week for an in-class type of offering. A lot of online classes these days are meeting in person or on Zoom or whatever, but one way or another, you're going to have more flexibility, which is a great thing. You can do your work or sometimes work through the material at 3 a.m., in your underwear if you want. But with all that flexibility comes constant temptation to sort of let things slide. And of course, it's COVID too, so things are going crazy all around us all the time. So make sure you are creating a schedule for yourself above all. Each week when you're going to work on the course. And if it is 3 a.m., like I said, then, and that's really what works, then oftentimes that's totally fine. But make sure that it happens every Tuesday at 3 a.m. or maybe more like every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Create that schedule, stick to it as much as you possibly can. Make sure you're checking in on the course several times a week, not letting things pile up on yourself. Stick with the schedule, as I said. And keep in mind strongly that online courses often take more time than in-person courses, especially if you're new to it, and especially if your instructor is new to it as well. I can say from my own years of experience, it takes a while to get the feel for how long things are going to take your students when you build online assessments, activities, and that kind of thing. So they may be learning as they go as well. So be ready to invest maybe a little more time and create that time and that space for yourself and stick to the schedule. So we can move to the next slide now. All right, metacognition, knowing how to learn. So here's where we get into things that are a little less obvious maybe, although maybe they are obvious to you already. Metacognition is really crucial in any course you take in class or online, but especially here in the online space. Once again, being your own biggest asset, it's really important to monitor and to support your own learning, almost like your own TA or your own, member of the teaching team. Almost think of yourself that way. I'm a member of my own teaching team, and I'm the one closest to myself. I'm the one here in the desk with me who knows what's going on and can support that learning. To get started thinking about your own learning, what's working and what isn't working, I highly recommend looking at the learning outcomes for your course, which are hopefully there somewhere in a syllabus or somewhere in your online course. Look very carefully at exactly what you're supposed to be getting out of this course. And if your instructor has created module level outcomes or even activity level learning outcomes, which we love to do and love to encourage at CEL, and you may or may not see in your courses, look at those very, very carefully. This is really, really helpful as you work through your course to be your own biggest asset, to know where you're going. This is the point. This is what I'm supposed to get out of that. And while it's a very simple question, having it really clear in your head, why am I doing this? What should I be learning? Can make a huge difference in the online environment where you've got materials coming from all different directions and you've got to do a lot of the sorting of it. So look at those learning outcomes very carefully. As you go through all the learning materials in your course, keep asking yourself, how does this connect to this course? How does this connect to my own goals, those learning outcomes that you're reviewing, and ultimately my career, the work I'm doing, or the work I'm going to do? Keep creating the connections for yourself. Hopefully your instructors are doing a lot to signal this for you and indicate this for you. Like this is why you need to know whatever information. This is how you might use this in clinical practice at some point. Hopefully they're doing a lot of that for you, but do some of it yourself too. And to bring it together, one just tip, and this is on the more practical side for me, maybe journal about your learning, about the actual learning process itself. What's going well? What's going badly? What can you change in this whole experience? So if you're noticing, I'm getting tons of Zoom fatigue, or, it's just, I'm overwhelmed by the number of assignments, or I'm having a hard time sticking to that schedule, or whatever it is that's going well or going wrong, or the things that are going well, I find that these activities are going very, very well for me, and I'm learning a whole lot from whatever it is. Recording that, thinking about it, is really going to help you a lot to craft some strategies for how to succeed going forward in the rest of the course, obviously. So sit down, journal about it, just think about it, reflect, take a few minutes to meditate, close your eyes, turn off the screen, think, how is this really going for me in my learning process? So some metacognitive ideas there for you. So we can go to the next one now. Motivation, affect, and mental health. This is absolutely crucial. It's crucial in in-class learning as well, but very, very important online. And it's very important during COVID because we are all under so much pressure and so much stress. We're all saying it all the time, but now more than ever, keep an eye on yourself. Remember, be your own biggest asset in all of this. Again, we have that, what we call transactional distance. And if you don't make an effort on the learner side and on the instructor side to overcome that distance, then you can be having a really, really hard time back there behind the screen and have nobody really know. I mean, you might be struggling with just regular old blues and the malaise and frustration with life, with online learning, or you may be struggling with flat out mental health problems that are really affecting your experience in the course. But as much as your instructors want to know that information, as much as they really, really care, it is harder. Whether we like it or not, it is much harder to know exactly how your students are doing from the instructor side, as much as we would love to have that information. So you've got to be in there as much as you possibly can, taking a look at it yourself, keeping an eye on yourself, and asking how it's going. So monitor how you're doing with classes, life in general. Observe those stressful times and activities. This is kind of related to the last piece. When are things going well for me? Is it every Tuesday afternoon? My kids happen to come home a little early that day for whatever reason, and it's a terrible time for my schedule. And notice those things. When is the stress hitting? When is it more difficult or more easy to succeed in the course? Notice when you're at your most effective on the other side of that. Be careful with live sessions. You're probably a lot of you might be doing a lot of synchronous learning. We actually de-emphasize that quite a bit at CEL. We like to do asynchronous, but we have a long period of time for developing courses. So it's a lot easier to build good asynchronous courses. But if you're in a lot of Zoom sessions, be careful of that. Turn your camera off if you can. I hear a lot of instructors are out there demanding cameras on for long sessions. Without trashing anybody, I don't really agree with that. You need to be able to turn your camera off. It is absolutely proven beyond dispute that Zoom tires us out. Or whatever web conferencing tires us out more than in person. That's just a scientific fact at this point. And it helps if you can turn off that camera, do a little doodling, whatever you need to do, as long as you can still, of course, connect with the materials. And plan for breaks when you're done. I find when I'm on Zoom or these long sessions or teaching that way, I need a bit of a break. Put that into the schedule. So, I'm going to have a 2-hour lecture, and I'm going to need to just sit like for 15 minutes and I don't know, do nothing or something relaxing. Put that right into your schedule. Be ready for that. Create a little rhythm for yourself. So be cognizant if you are in those synchronous sessions. But ultimately, more than anything, reach out if you are struggling. I'm going to assume that your instructors absolutely care and do want you to succeed. But as I said at the beginning of this piece, it's really, really hard to know what's happening with people. And I tell my students right off the bat, I need your help. I need you to be an ally with me. We need to do this together, because I've had, like every instructor, students having a really hard time all the way up to full-blown mental health issues. And if you reach out, if you let me know, we can make adjustments, we can make changes, I can work with you. Maybe you need an extension, maybe whatever. Maybe you need different, need the materials to come in different ways. But we can work together, we can be flexible, but you gotta help me. I need your assistance. So reach out to the instructors, the rest of the team. Don't sit and suffer in silence. And hopefully everyone understands how hard a time this is, and will be there very much to help you. So the very last slide, I think, community. Community and a sense of connection with other human beings is absolutely essential to learn almost anything. You may be one of those rare and in some ways fortunate people who really can just kind of learn a topic by yourself or sort of teach yourself something. But the vast majority of us don't learn all that well that way. If we did, we wouldn't need universities or classes. We would just build a library or turn on an internet and you could learn anything. You learn anything in the world on the internet, right? But we come together in classes, in courses, for really good reasons, because we're social creatures. We need to connect. And it changes the entire dynamic of what's going on in our brain and in our psychology when we know that other people around us are interested in the same topic, are trying to learn that same topic. Just knowing that others care has a huge impact on our success in learning, to say nothing about the ability to actually reach out in practical ways to those people, learn from each other and with each other. That makes such a difference. So community is the whole enchilada in a lot of ways when it comes to online learning. And the big thing that that changes as you shift the online environment is that we have to do a whole bunch of different things to try to create that community. You can't just walk into a classroom and, you know, from the instructor point of view, walk in and, you know, maybe chit chat a little bit and build some rapport and be willing to stick around after class and hop over to the office for a little chat. Those are all key strategies for helping build community. And when we shift to online, things change a lot. So again, hopefully your instructors are very, very cognizant of this and are doing what they can to create interactions between you and other students, between you and them as instructors. But it's very similar to what I said before about mental health and affect and all that with my students. One of the things I'd like to say right at the beginning as well is, again, I need your help too. As an instructor, it's not possible for me to create a community just on my own, however amazingly, wonderfully designed the course is that your instructor has put together for you. If students don't participate and buy in and become part of that, then community is very hard to build, if not impossible to build. So my advice / request in a way for all of you is commit to helping build a community in your online courses. Say to yourself consciously, I'm going to be a part of this. I'm going to take charge to some degree and be an active participant in that. Do that by participating fully in your discussions and group activities. Look to make connections. Maybe you could spearhead a study group. Maybe you can reach out to some other students and say, hey, you know, this material is difficult. Let's come together and work on it and study it together. Take an interest in other people. Don't just be a lurker in your online classes. And again, reach out. If you just take that step of saying, I'm going to be part of this, building the community, not only does that make the whole course go better for everyone else, of course, it will make the course go better for you as well. You will become more connected with other people. You will feel a greater sense of support around you. And once again, just that sense that there are others with you in this kind of digital room, if you can think of it that way, even if they're not all logged in at the same time. The sense of the existence of others who care about this thing is going to have a huge, huge positive impact on everything about your learning experience. So be a part of it and be part of helping us all to build that. So those are my kind of key overarching things. I know I talk really fast, so you got to forgive me. This is why I do asynchronous courses, one of the reasons. But just to review them all, back again, is the access to information. Make sure you've got those learning materials and in a format that you can get a hold of, whether it's through internet access or accessibility concerns. Make sure you can get the stuff that you need. Time, be sure you've got that schedule, stick with it. Metacognition, think about your own learning process, maybe journal about it and try to make adjustments or reach out for help if that process isn't going well. Try to stay motivated and keep your affect up, but especially reach out if you're having a hard time and let people and your instructor know. And finally, be a part of building the community, be an active part of that. And hopefully with those 5 things, it'll go as well as it can for you online. So that's my presentation. I think, I'm not sure if we were going to do a few questions right off the bat or if we were waiting till later, but I'm happy to do either.
Yeah, so we'll have a quick discussion period closer to the end, but I wanted to touch upon a couple of points that you kind of brought up. Having been in a lot of the places these students were in nursing programs before, for most of us, were entirely in class, and then being thrown into the online setting, which I know for myself I did in going to a fully online master's, it is like an, oh my gosh, what is happening? And I love how you bring reality to that, but that's how a lot of our students are feeling, but also faculty who are going, okay, now I can't just take all the notebooks and stick it in a PowerPoint. It's not gonna work. So I think there's a big reality in that, yes, online learning takes time. And I think a lot of our students that are online will say it takes more time than being in class, as you mentioned, just by nature, in that you can't walk away from the classroom, right? It's constantly on, and building in those breaks is so important. And as a learner and being in the online learning setting, you know, I think you get so busy, especially in the nursing programs where you have placement and all these other things happening, that you almost feel guilty taking those breaks, but you can't be energized and kind of a full learner without incorporating those. So I think you really touched on that. And I love how you said reflection, because in nursing, I think we're nauseated by how many times we hear reflect, reflect, reflect. And now we're told when we're a learner, reflect again. But
reflect on that too. Why don't you reflect on that reflection too?
Reflect
That's
but it's so true. We need to know who we are as learners, and that's how we can kind of strategize for success based on that. So I think you've given us a lot to think about, a lot to incorporate for students, or even as faculty for some of us, that'll help kind of make for a better learning environment as we move forward. So thank you. And I hope you'll stay tuned for our question period. I'm sure some of our students and maybe faculty will have some.
Yes, I'm happy to stick around, and I'll be looking forward to it.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna jump back onto our screen here. Alrighty, so thanks to Daniel, and like he mentioned, he'll be here for questions at the end, and I'm sure some of you as faculty or students or just general inquiry of the online world will have things to ask and share with him. But to keep our agenda going, next up, I'd like to welcome Beth Blackett. And so Beth works at Queen's as the Health Promotion Project Specialist in the Student Wellness Services. So since arriving at Queen's in 2007, Beth has developed and facilitated a wide range of wellness interventions for Queen's. She was a mental health first aid trainer for 8 years and is currently a Safe Talk and Assist suicide intervention trainer on campus. So she's developed several trainings for students, staff, and faculty focused on reducing stigma, identifying and responding to someone in distress, and practicing self-care, which we know for our nurses and students is just so critical at this time. So Beth has also been a volunteer supervisor with 2 programs on campus, the Peer Health Educators and on-campus observation room volunteers. In addition, she's played a significant role in policy development related to alcohol use, a smoke-free campus, sexual violence, and mental health. So Beth, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you. That's so odd, always listening to your own bio, but thank you for that really warm introduction. It's really nice to kind of meet everyone. I know this is an odd way to maybe do some training, but I'm really happy to be here. So I'm gonna just share my screen here. And I know everyone presents a little bit differently, but as I'm going through the presentation, feel free to stop me and ask questions. If you want to put something in the chat, that's fine too. I do have some opportunities maybe to engage a little bit with the content. So the focus of today is really about creating a customized self-care plan, and to sort of pull in some of the great information of the previous presenter. Just like learning is very individual, our health is as well. And so It's not as though I can just kind of say, here are the 5 things that you need to be doing each and every day. It's very individual, and I will kind of touch on that, but I'll also bring in that community level as well, because both of those things are really quite important when we talk about self-care, mental health. Can everyone see my slide? Just, I have a very different view for whatever reason. Yes. Okay,
Yes,
amazing. Thank you. So
Perfectly
these
good.
are the quick learning goals. Basically just giving you a little brief overview of stress and the stress response, but really the focus will be on kind of managing stress, because that's really at the crux of self-care. Stress also gets a really horrible reputation, although there are some benefits to stress, and figuring out how do we harness them to get ourselves sort of moving. And we often see this in the context of learning around deadlines. We see sort of that deadline creeping up, and it tends to kind of help give us a little bit of stress to get us motivated to act. But how do we sort of avoid going over the top of that stress curve? I'll spend a little bit of time talking about some evidence-based self-care strategies, but I wanted to also give you a chance to develop a specific action plan around starting maybe one new health habit in the near future. So I don't love spending a ton of time on definitions, but I do think because self-care is talked a lot, especially in popular media, and it's maybe attached to some things when it doesn't give that full overarching kind of view of it. So it's the ability as us as individuals, but also families and communities to sort of both kind of promote health, but also prevent disease, maintain good health, but also potentially cope with any illness that might come up, or disability. And that might be with or without the support of a healthcare provider. I'll be focusing a little bit more on mental health, but I always like to mention, as you all probably are very well aware, mental health is very interconnected to different domains of health. So you'll see, I will pull in kind of our physical health domain as well as our social health domain. With self-care, I think this is a really important thing to sort of remember. It's very individual, and so what would work obviously for me might be very different from each and every one of you, but self-care is really meant to be something that helps us sort of refuel, recharge, rather than sort of taking away from us. So often the way we figure that out is a bit through life experience, but it's also taking a little bit of time to reflect, pulling in what was already discussed about lots of reflection around learning and other reflection within your nursing program, to really figure it out, like, what is it that I need right now that'll help me kind of recharge and refuel. Self-care, unfortunately, doesn't just happen. Often it has to be something that we put some time and attention into. And like I said, it really does need to be unique to you. There isn't a one-size-fits-all model. And I love this sort of depiction because I do find in popular media, we associate self-care for whatever reason with bubble baths. And if you enjoy bubble baths and they help bring down your stress, by all means, that's a great strategy for you. But if that is not your thing and you don't enjoy it and it causes you stress, that is not what you should be doing for self-care. There's always an alternate option. I always like to sort of put a little bit of caution when we talk a little bit about self-care, and especially over the pandemic. I've seen lots of interesting things flash across kind of different websites and on social media, where people are sort of indulging in a lot of different things, whether it be sort of like drinking a little bit more or binging on Netflix or whatever it is, and sort of making a bit of a distinction between self-care and self-indulgence is really important. So I'm not saying that you should never drink wine or never enjoy Netflix or whatever it is that maybe you like to do for self-indulgence. I just think sometimes when we're feeling quite a significant amount of stress, whether it's related to school or working or home life, we need to sort of look at what are the things that I can do to bring down that level of stress. Unfortunately, we've also seen a bit of commodification with self-care. And so sometimes people believe that we need to spend money to engage in self-care. And really, that's not the case. At no point should self-care be considered something for those in a privileged position. Although I do like to point out that there are some elements that make carving out time for self-care much more challenging for certain individuals. So say, for example, if you're living and working paycheck to paycheck, whether there's something that can do to take down that stress, a bubble bath isn't really going to cut it. It's a matter of kind of taking away that, or looking at that social determinant of health around socioeconomic status. So I do like to kind of put that out there. I'm very well aware that sometimes self-care can look as though it's only for those in a privileged position, but in reality, it could also be that it is much more easily done by those that might not be under certain elements of stress outside their control. This is a quote I found a couple of years ago, and it's one of my favorite ones, and I wish I could give credit to the person who wrote it, but it was anonymous when it was submitted. And so self-care really is about building a life, ideally, that you don't feel like you constantly need to escape from. So we often hear, especially students, where they're just like, well, I'll just get through the next 6 weeks, or I'll just, this fall term is really hard, or no, you know what, first year is really challenging, and then second year it'll get a lot better. And unfortunately, I can hear people, especially in a student position, talking about that for the length of their degree, and they're sort of holding on for dear life, as opposed to sort of getting some sort of enjoyment throughout their time as a student, and potentially as a professional as well. So not that to say that some days might be more stressful than others, and some days self-care might be really challenging, but ideally you're sort of building a life that you don't feel as though it's just constantly putting you under massive amounts of pressure. So this is where I would love to kind of hear a little bit from you about maybe what you have been doing, or you've heard of, or would like to try doing to maintain physical, mental, social health during physical distancing, because I know that the current pandemic has challenged us all in many different ways. But I would love to sort of hear maybe what are some things that you've kind of either been doing or heard of doing, or would like to try doing during our current sort of parameters. So feel free, you can unmute yourself, you can put something into the chat. I'm open for any of that, and I'll just kind of stop sharing my screen there to see the chat a little bit better and that sort of thing.
I see we have some comments here in the chat box, which is awesome. So we have cooking, baking, and yoga, a nephew that was born and getting to visit via FaceTime, and hiking.
Nice. Those are all really great things. And we had this lovely week of exceptional weather last week in Kingston, and it was like people just got out and were active like they were in the summer again. And time with a new family member, 2-month-old. That's such a fun age to kind of see. Nice. I love the getting active, especially with other people. That helps so much, that social connection and getting outside in nature, active.
Doris shared visiting grandkids. That can take you away of anything.
Nice.
It's like the best remedy. Even if you don't want to be away, they take you away. No questions asked.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. How old are your kids, the grandkids?
So the ones that babble with us are 5 and 3. And this people will find it interesting. I shared with a few people yesterday. The 5-year-old has this. Listen to this. RNAO, we all want RNAO, we all want RNAO, join RNAO now, join RNAO now. He invented that, gave me that in writing. And I said to Ricardo, oh my gosh, I should have taped this. This is the best membership recruitment ever.
Yeah, that's very true. Children are great at bringing in that joy and that laughter. And I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I fully get the made up songs on the spot. It's impressive. Yeah, so using technology, not only for school, but to connect with family and friends, also a really, really great suggestion. Thank you for sharing those. It's wonderful to see that people are still getting a chance to do something for their health and well-being. Even though we have
definition. Your definition that you said you don't know from where it came is one of the best definitions I have ever seen. And it's so applicable to everything.
Good. No, I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to sharing. So, most people who go into sort of health professions are probably really quite aware of the stress response. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, but I do think it's important to point out the fact that there are different stages of that response. And there's that initial stage where we sort of perceive stressors, and these might be kind of real world issues, but for humans especially, they might also be hypothetical situations or worries. And so it doesn't have to be something that's physically in our environment. Our minds are incredible at initiating that stress response as well, where it takes in that stressor, interprets it as a stressor, and then it puts us into an increased state of arousal. And arousal fits on a continuum. It's not like you're sort of fully not aroused, whatever, and then you're at your max. And you might have heard of this referred to as like the fight, flight, or freeze. So when our arousal level is quite high, we sometimes get that urge to sort of like run away in the opposite direction, or kind of like stand up and fight for whatever is really causing that stress. And sometimes people just get that feeling of not being able to do anything and sort of freezing in the moment. The other thing I like to point out around the stress response is that not only sort of our bodies and our minds are different for health overall, but we differ in terms of our vulnerability to stress. And so these different sort of things that are listed here is not an exhaustive list by any means, but our vulnerability could be impacted by our current kind of living or home environment. It could also be our history or past around any trauma or lived experiences, our access to kind of our friends, family members, peers, our social network, the social determinants of health that I was mentioning before. So socioeconomic status can also play into it, whether we've experienced any oppression or marginalization, obviously has a huge role as well, and then early childhood experiences. So what might even happen to two people that's very much the same, our vulnerability to that will change how we react and how we deal with it because of our past or current sort of situation. I mentioned that not all stress is bad, even though we do associate stress with negative stress or distress. There is such a thing as positive stress or eustress. And this is just a really simple visual depiction of the stress curve. I've heard it called a number of different things, including the inverted U theory. We use it a lot, especially in sport performance, where we're always looking for those situations for optimal level of performance and what level of stress kind of gets us there. But it very much does apply to academic kind of workload and stress as well. So you can see along the y-axis there's our performance, and then along the x-axis, that's our stress level. And so if we don't have any stress at all, where our performance is often quite low, and then you can see that we get up to kind of that optimal level of stress at the top of that curve, and we see a really impressive amount of performance. Unfortunately, as human beings, we're not designed to handle really prolonged periods of stress. And so what'll happen is that if we're in a period of prolonged stress, the energy that we have stored in our body to deal with that gets depleted, and that results in our sort of feelings of exhaustion. It can lead to burnout as well. So just being aware that there is sort of that optimal level. Often people will describe it as getting into a sense of flow where everything else kind of disappears and you're able to be super productive. You forget about all other things, and time almost tends to sort of speed by because of that ability to focus and concentrate. I'm a big advocate of developing a self-care plan, and it's not as though you just develop a self-care plan and you're good to go for the rest of your life. It needs to be something that we tend to on and off, and it might need more tending at certain times or less tending at others. And it really does help us prepare for stressful times. It also helps you sort of prioritize your health. And the reason for this is that we see it kind of associated with increased productivity. We've seen it also associated with increased happiness. And then if we're obviously taking care of ourselves, then we can help others. And so I think the profession that you sort of dedicated yourselves to is incredibly noble. I come from a huge family of nurses. And so I have seen how much they impact the people they care for in such positive ways, but you can't sort of take care of others, obviously, if you're not doing well yourself. And ultimately, we do also see quite a bit of burnout in the caregiving professions. And so looking at, there's a whole slew of research around that. And the people who are able to kind of be in those professions long-term without burnout do often engage in really good self-care practices. So with that in mind, here's some pretty solid evidence-based self-care strategies. It's not all of them, but I wanted to at least give you a few. I think it was mentioned by the previous presenter, just the importance of taking breaks. And it's really sometimes hard right now because we're essentially kind of learning in the same environment that we sometimes need to take breaks in, not just the short breaks, but the long breaks as well. So I always like to sort of emphasize the fact that our concentration is just like any other muscle in our body. We do need to give it rest for it to function optimally, and it can function suboptimally for sure. We see that happen a lot, but to be in it for the long haul and kind of avoid being overworked and not getting to that burnout stage, you really do need to put in some rest. And so the strategies for that include changing your scenery. And it could be, if you're fortunate to change into maybe a patio or a porch or a new room. I usually joke to people that I'm like, sometimes that might be, I'm going to sit facing this side of the wall for my work, and then I'm going to sit facing the other side of the wall for my break, or I'm going to stand up perhaps for my break. Active breaks are usually better. Humans were not designed to sit. It's really important to sort of get up, move around, get some blood kind of moving throughout your body, and then have that combination of short as well as long breaks. This is a really critical one. And so everyone has limits, and our limits will shift and change with different life circumstances. And so often people find it challenging to say no, but it's really important to say no sometimes. And that could be that you say, I can't do this right now, or I can't do this whole part right now, but I can do this small part. Or saying, you know what, I can't do this right now, but my colleague or my peer, so-and-so could potentially do it. I'll connect with them to kind of follow up. And it could be also asking for help. So the previous presenter also mentioned, please don't ever suffer in silence. And that is true to academics as well as your own sort of personal health and well-being. So everyone will need help at some point in their lives. And if you're often the one providing help, it's really important to also see the other side and what it's like to get help from others too. I mentioned that the current environment we're in is challenging. So doing schooling or working from home can lead to overworking because we no longer have that easy separation. You know what, I'm going to go up my door, I'm going to go to my classes or tutorials. We don't have that ability. And so a few suggestions, if you're struggling with that, is to really schedule blocks of time to do academics, and then see where you can put in some of the breaks there too. And so I'm a big fan fan of figuring out when is it that you're most productive to sort of learn or work or do different tasks, right? If they're simple, mindless tasks. So for me, for example, if I'm writing up client notes, I know that doesn't take a lot of focus and attention. I can probably put that at the end of my day when I'm not able to sort of focus as easily. If I have to work on something that involves writing or reading and comprehending, I probably will put that at the beginning of my day. The Pomodoro technique, I also borrow from some colleagues at Student Academic Success Services. So again, based on research, the importance of taking breaks. So doing 25 minutes of focused work and then taking a 5-minute break, or doing 50 minutes of work and 10 minutes break. A student mentioned an app that they found really helpful last week to me. One is called Flora, which is available for iPhones, and then Forest through Android. And they told me that it was great because it gave them something to visually see how well they were doing at taking their breaks. They could sort of keep their tree or their plant alive and then build a beautiful garden. And they did that during the exam period when they really did have to apply that quite a bit. I could spend forever talking about the importance of eating well and moving your body, but I put a few clickable links in the slides, which you can take a look at. There's a professor at Queen's who developed a 5-minute workout that requires no equipment and can be done in a very short amount of time. And there's lots of other ways to sort of get active. I love how people have mentioned that they're going out and getting active with other people. That's a great strategy. And then trying to fuel yourself with really good food. And it's not to say that you can't have some fun food or indulgent food, but just making sure, especially as you're studying, that refueling yourself with kind of whole foods as much as possible is always great. Foods can also be a bit protective against illness, but I do issue caution around foods being curative. There's lots of misinformation online, especially with the pandemic these days. And so just making sure that you sort of see that food can definitely play a part in protecting against illness, but it definitely isn't sort of curative that way either. Oops. Sleep, this is also quite critical for our self-care and mental health. So if you have any trouble sort of getting good quality sleep, here are a couple of things that I found to be quite helpful. So reducing or eliminating light, as well as content from our screens before bed. So it's really easy to, with technology these days, to sort of pull in your phone or tablet into bed with you and sort of scroll through content. But unfortunately, sometimes that light, as well as what you're doing, kind of brings you later on to the evening, going past when you maybe wanted to go to bed, and maybe kind of keeps your mind moving a little bit there too. Oh, thank you for posting that link. That's awesome. Consistent sleep prep is key. We see kids doing this really, really well. And then sometimes as adults, we think that we're good, we're immune, we don't need to do that. But generally we see that if we do the same kind of 3, 4, 5 things each and every night before bed, that gives our brain and our body that signal that it's time to sort of power down and get some good sleep. Students often ask me about naps, and I say I'm a big fan of them as long as I don't interfere with your ability to get a good night's rest. Usually for naps to be effective, they're kind of before a certain number of hours before you actually go to sleep, and they're less than 30 minutes, so you don't get into that really, really deep sleep. If possible, I know that space is really tight these days, but trying not to sleep or trying not to study on your bed. You want to keep that zone as a stress-free zone as much as possible. And then if you do find that you're trying to go to sleep and your mind is just racing, sometimes even jotting down what's on your mind onto a piece of paper can help give your body that signal and brain that signal that it's okay, I've got it all captured here and I can sort of let that go until tomorrow, which is when I can deal with it. Caffeine in food can impact our ability to sort of get to sleep. And so if you notice that, just limiting kind of caffeine in beverages, caffeinated beverages, as well as really heavy food about 3 hours before bed, and then really turning off social and news, which can be all consuming sometimes. I have lost the ability. There we go. This was mentioned before. We are very social creatures as humans. In fact, we have a built-in response called tend and befriend during periods of stress. And so what'll happen is that we see a release of oxytocin, which tends to counteract our stress hormones of adrenaline and cortisol. And so when we connect with other people, something as simple as that, it tends to really reduce our stress. And so that might mean the great FaceTime calls that were sort of mentioned, going on a physically distanced hike or walk with other people, or phoning, and sometimes connecting through text or social media can also be helpful. And then getting involved in whatever extracurriculars you can. And I know sometimes those are limiting right now or very different from what we're used to, but those are still very critical to our overall health and well-being. And I would say sometimes even more so right now. Watching your language. This, I think sometimes we turn an eye to, or turn our minds from, because we don't think it's as important as what it is. But a lot of times we will kind of engage in quite a bit of negative self-talk, and we're often much harder on ourselves than we would ever be to any one of the people that we cared about. And so if you do find yourself engaging in that negative self-talk, really kind of trying to change it into a positive thing that can sort of be repeated. And our thinking is very much tied to our emotions and our behaviors. And so something as simple as changing kind of our thinking, or what we're sort of using in our head as self-talk, can impact our emotions in a positive way if we change it to positive self-talk, and then subsequently change our behavior too. I do like to make mention of the fact that obviously the pandemic has had an impact on our overall health and well-being. And so hearing about the pandemic can be really upsetting. And it's really amusing because someone before, I think I jumped on the call, texted me a little bit about school closures potentially as an option. And so I think it's just really reinforcing about the fact that we do need to turn off the news every once in a while and avoid getting fully saturated and pulled in. And it's okay to take a break from social media as well, because we sometimes get our news that way too. So instead of maybe, you know, right before bed, looking at all the news stories or looking through social media, see if there's a couple of things that you might be able to do instead. And so this might be practicing mindfulness, and there's a ton of research to support how effective this can be at reducing our stress. And so that could be something as simple as 4 square breathing. So if you kind of picture your computer screen right now, it's a really simple square. The idea is that if you go from like the top left to the top right, you would take a breath in, going down the right side, holding that breath, and then going along the bottom, you would exhale, breathe out, and then along that left-hand side, kind of holding. So that's a simple breathing exercise. If you find you are really feeling quite a lot of stress, breathing brings us into the present moment, almost like nothing else, because it is something that is always present for us. Another grounding exercise that people found really helpful is something called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that just has to do with your 5 senses. So, you know, looking around, what are 5 things that you can see? What are 4 things that you can feel against maybe your body, or you can touch? What are 3 things that you can smell, taste, and so on and so forth? Guided imagery, people sometimes feel really helps before bed, kind of imagining a really good positive space that makes you kind of feel happy and light. Journaling, writing letters, and so that could be to sort of focus on, you know, what are some feelings or worries or thoughts that I am experiencing, and I can sort of write them down and set them down for the day. Gratitude journaling can also be really quite helpful too. And that's just a matter of, you know, what are 3 things that I'm grateful for today? I'm grateful that the sun is out and I get to enjoy some sunshine. I'm grateful, you know, that I get to kind of go outside and get some really fresh, crisp air. Sometimes they start really small, and then some days you're kind of grateful for bigger things too. And then moving or dancing or singing, whatever it is your thing, that can also be a good thing that doesn't take a lot of time either. With self-care, I also like just to make mention that sometimes we do benefit from having an emergency back pocket self-care plan. And so this can be really helpful if something really tough happens unexpectedly. And so that can involve, what can you do when you're upset that would be really good for you? So for me, for example, I love being near the water. I find it very calming. I grew up around the water in the Trent Severn Waterway. And so that for me is something that I can do very easily if I'm ever feeling upset. The next two are all about people. Who can you connect with if you need support or a distraction? Those might be the same people, they might be different people, but also who are some people maybe you should avoid if you're having a hard time, who might be in your life for certain reasons, but if you're having a hard time, maybe they're not the person you would want to turn to. The other thing, listing things you want to avoid if you're having a hard time. So for example, for whatever reason, if someone's feeling upset after a breakup, we think that they should sort of like listen to really sad music. But if we think about that critically, is that actually helpful, or is it just sort of adding to the feelings of sadness? And then the positive things that you can say to yourself, that positive self-talk can also be really helpful too. All right, so I've talked a lot and I want to take up just 5 minutes to just kind of getting you to think about your own kind of plan around well-being for the next 1 to 2 weeks. So given all that we've talked about, I want you to sort of think about maybe what is one thing that you would really like to do for your well-being in the next 1 to 2 weeks. And I'll get you to think about that, but also try to operationalize it a little bit more into kind of what we refer to as a SMART plan. So what is it that you're going to do? Where are you going to do it? When? How long? How often? How much? And when are you going to start? So here's an example. So starting tonight, I will spend 5 minutes writing down 3 things I'm grateful for before bed every night before or for the next 2 weeks. So I want you to kind of think about like what it is that you maybe want to try and start doing. And then, like I said, try and operationalize it a little bit. And if you want to write it down on your phone, on a piece of paper, if you want to write it into the chat, you are welcome to do that. It's whatever you're most comfortable doing. All right, so if you haven't got all that stuff sorted, that's okay. You can feel free to come back to it. I'm just mindful that I want to give you some time to kind of have questions as well. So the big thing about creating a bit of a, what we refer to as a brief action plan is around confidence somewhat. So if you were to sort of develop a plan, and then try to sort of give yourself a number on a scale of 0 to 10 for confidence. 0 being there's no way that's going to happen. And 10 being I'm super confident that I can make that happen. Kind of write down where you think you are with that plan. And if you find that your confidence level is less than 7, it's not an exact science as much as I wish health behavior change was. But usually when our confidence is less than 7, we're a bit less likely to be able to see sort of that change happen. And so that doesn't mean that you give up on your plan altogether. It just means that you adjust your plan a little bit. So for example, if I were to go back and say, you know what, I'm at a 5 for my plan that I developed over here, means I have to take a look at it and see, okay, what is it that's probably bringing down my confidence a little bit? And I'll say, well, you know what, like tonight is Friday. It's been a very long week. Children at the end of the week get really like spinny, excited for the weekend. So I don't think I can actually start tonight, but I probably can, get myself ready to start on Sunday. And then my confidence is just a little bit higher, but not quite at a 7. And so maybe what I can do is, instead of saying every night, I can probably do every other night for the next 2 weeks. And that'll get me up to that confidence level of 7 or higher. The other thing that helps around planning to kind of make a bit of a shift or a change is writing it down, as I mentioned, but also telling someone. And that doesn't have to be the people on this call or me. It could be kind of a friend, a family member, a loved one. And they're often really great at being our cheerleaders, but also helping us feel a bit more, holding us accountable to what it is that we said we wanted to do. Before I finish, I do like to point out a small thing around community when it comes to self-care. So as humans, we're all very interdependent. We're not just here to take care of ourselves. And so it's really important that people know there are others we can turn to create that sense of belonging and social connection. And sometimes when we shout self-care at someone who's really struggling, it's really not that helpful, because what that person needs is more community of care. And so I like to sort of point out, if we think about the culture of community care during grief and loss, we see people kind of coming together and offering and providing that support. And so with COVID-19, we've seen a lot of research around how there's been quite a lot of grief and loss. And it may not be to the death of a loved one, but it would be sort of that grief and loss about the experiences or things that we haven't got a chance to do in the way that we thought we would have a chance to do them. And so that might be with regards to community of care. How do we create it? It's around sort of how do we identify when someone's struggling, and then how do we get them the support that they really need. So I will end it there, because I don't want to take up any more of the time that you'd maybe reserve for questions, but my email address is there as well. If you have any questions now or afterwards, I'm happy to chat over email or set up sort of a phone call or whatever it is that can help. And then I sent along the slides too, so you'll have them with all of the links and all the information as well.
Lil, if you give me a second, because I need to head
Yes,
to an interview with the Canadian Press. So first of all, I need to tell you, Beth, that I often get so stressed out by the presentations about not being stressed out, that this is one of the first times in my life that I hear a presentation that is inspiring. I said to Lil to please send me your slides and also your contact. I think we will bring you to our staff meeting. It's fantastic. Yeah. We do a lot of work together as a group. It's a large group.
Yep.
You're just fantastic. It's a mix. It's really the fact that you also introduce social determinants and understand that not everybody can, do the same. The fact that you don't impose and that you let people use their own, just fantastic. And you're also your style of presentation. You're so calming and just fantastic. I missed the opportunity to hear the previous speaker. I am sorry about that. I was with the minister. And as for the news, you will hear me in the news. So we have been all over the news, just so you know, first of all, CP24, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can post those tweets that reporters and OHA have done about us. That will be very good, Lil. I send them to your WhatsApp. So they did change the framework. They didn't change the framework. They changed the thresholds for the framework. They asked me if we will react in a pleasing form. And I said, no, it's better. It's better than what it was. They shared with me that all the tables are in agreement with the new thresholds. I said, that's good, but we are not. And so we will continue to ask for tougher restrictions in the areas that are red zones, which is, of course, not there. The good thing with the changes they made, though, to recognize that, is that more areas will come into red zones. So that already is helpful. But will it really curve where we are? Likely not sufficiently, because we waited too long. So time will tell. A pleasure to really hear you, and a pleasure. I am amazed that at the event that you organized, Lil and executive, all of you. Just fantastic, fantastic. And I am going to follow some of those pieces too. I saw Ola wrote about the 6 hours of sleep. I always say it's like magic sleeping. One should know that it's not magic, but it's like magic.
Yeah, I see. I read through the comments as well, and sleep, there's a lot of like guilt about I should be doing this or I should be doing that. Sleeping is just one of those things that it impacts so much, right? We get more emotional when we haven't slept, or we don't get as productive, or we, overall just feel worse. And so if it helps to say, like I said, you can get more sleep, that I fully will take that on. I'm happy to do that.
I don't think I want to say to anybody in my house, because my husband is on my case already. So no, I'm not going to say that secret. That's between you and I and the group.
Fair enough, fair enough.
But yeah, sleep is also very good when people suffer losses. I don't know, you have read probably a lot about that it allows your brain to work through those losses and heal in a better way. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a plethora of research that if I had all the time in the world, I would love to sort of explore that. But that's a new one. I haven't heard about like loss
Yes.
and grief and
Yes.
processing, but I think it aligns
Speak
itself
with
so
people
well.
that have lost a dear person, whether a parent or a spouse or worse, a kid or something.
Yeah.
And they dream a lot about the loss and they process it as they're dreaming. There is a lot written about that, and it truly is miraculous.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much, Doris, for being with us today and staying this half. I appreciate it,
My
despite
pleasure.
a busy
I learn a lot.
Good, I'm glad. I
Thank
challenge you to implement some of those self-care between your
I
meetings.
absolutely will. And trust me, I do some of that.
Good stuff.
Yeah. The piece you didn't mention, Beth, and it's important in addition to social determinants, and I haven't read about it, but I believe on it. It also depends on your makeup. You know how you are. Like when people start to talk, don't get, you will have burnout. You will have burnout. Different people have different thresholds for stress. That's important too. And the other thing is many of the techniques you spoke, especially during COVID, I also believe it helps build resilience to stress. Not that you need to over push it, but
Yeah, no, I for sure agree with that. I've sort of said to a lot of colleagues and friends and family members, it's almost as though we're in a social experiment about building resilience because of all the adjustments that and losses and things that we've had to deal with. And I do agree, like that individual difference around threshold, and we all react differently to different types of stressful situations. I think people are often really hard on themselves and saying like, I should have like not burnt out, or I should have been better. I should have been like this other person, and realizing that we all have different strengths, and it's okay that you don't perform perfectly in every situation. This idea of perfectionism we hear a lot with our institution, and trying to move away from that, kind of very focused on this one grade, this one test, and looking a little bit outward at the bigger picture sometimes can be helpful.
fantastic. Just fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a terrific weekend, everyone. Try to enjoy the weather. Meanwhile, we still can a bit. Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the RNAO, the presentation. Lil, you can probably answer. Otherwise, you can always WhatsApp me and I will send my best answer or get you the answer.
Awesome. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions regards to RNAO, self-care, or online learning, now is your chance. You're welcome to raise your hand, turn on your mic, or throw something in the comments. I know Doris has to leave, but the rest of us will be here for just a couple more minutes.
I have a minute. My interview is at 3:30.
Okay.
Here you go, and I don't need to prepare.
Awesome. So I don't hear anyone. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say that I'm so grateful for this presentation, because like I think I needed it so much, because I'm so overwhelmed with school, with work, with extracurricular activities, And like I said, if I sleep for 6 hours, I feel like it's a sin. I shouldn't be sleeping. I should be doing something else. But after listening to this presentation, I will have to sleep for 7 hours tonight. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
I'm glad you found benefit and you've already developed that self-care plan. That Pastor was encouraging us to do, and you're kind of sound very confident and ready to take action. So that's exciting.
That's right.
No, it's
Thank
exciting.
you.
I think I would challenge everyone that's joined us today in some way. And with the weekend approaching, and I know some of us, if you're working this weekend, it's challenging, but to kind of tackle one thing that would be reasonable for you and within your means to focus on yourself. I think if we can walk, and that was something even Daniel touched on in online learning, that we sometimes get so consumed by all these online meetings and different things that are happening, that break is so important. So I think if there's kind of a go-to, or scrap all the other closing remarks, but that you do focus on yourself and doing something for you in the midst of everything else that's happening. So that being said, really the key takeaways from our session today in this fall tour was that RNAO is here for you, whether that be as an NP, an RN, or nursing student, and that there's lots happening on the advocacy side and the political forefront, that RNAO is really challenging and standing up and speaking out to make sure actions are done properly, and informed by evidence to move us forward, whether that be through the pandemic or just in healthcare nursing as a whole, and that lots of opportunities exist for you to get involved in RNAO as a student or in your workplace, as well as on the other side for our student success series, and this being the first session in that, is that there's many strategies that are available and kind of these concepts that Daniel touched on that can help facilitate our online learning experience, and knowing that you're not alone in this new territory of online learning, whether you're a professor or as a student. And that we all need to reflect and learn from these different things that are happening to move forward and to be better learners, and that your wellness is at the core of everything that you do as an online learner or as a nurse or as a leader, and that we need to focus on ourselves in order to better focus on others. So I appreciate you all being here with us today and taking this time out of your very busy schedules to talk about these important topics. I've shared some resources for RNAO for the Center for Extended Learning and Queens, and I know there were more listed in the presentation. As we've all said, we will make sure you all have the slides as well as the recording that will be posted next week. And I encourage you to check all of these different forums out and join, especially ours for RNAO, our Twitter, or our Facebook, to stay up to date with what's happening, as well as I do know Queens and Waterloo have Twitter accounts as well, so I'm sure there's more information you can gather there. So with that being said, I've left you with the contact information for all of the chapters across the region, as well as myself. Never hesitate to reach out. We're here from you and we're learning together and happy to support you. And thanks again to Beth, Daniel, and Doris for being here and sharing with us today. Your expertise is totally invaluable, and we're so grateful for you to spend that time with us. So thanks everyone for joining.
And here is my call. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.